This channel isn't just about stories. It's about the people who experience them together. If you're new here, welcome, hit subscribe and join us. And after the story, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.
Elena Marquez thought the most dangerous thing about staying late at school was the walk to her car. She was wrong. When a single gunshot shatters the rain-soaked silence of Lincoln High's parking lot, the 26-year-old art teacher becomes the only witness to a brutal execution. The killer sees her. He finds her. And instead of ending her life, he offers her a choice more terrifying than death itself. Marry him, or let his enemies tear her apart. Follow Elena's story to the very end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that Friday night, hammering against the tall windows of Lincoln High School with the kind of relentless fury that made the world feel smaller, more isolated. Elena Marquez sat alone in her third-floor classroom, surrounded by towers of ungraded watercolor projects and charcoal sketches that smelled faintly of fixative spray and teenage ambition. She should have gone home hours ago. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered slightly as thunder rolled across the New York skyline, casting strange shadows across the empty desks. Elena rubbed her tired eyes and reached for her thermos of coffee, cold now, bitter and thick. She'd been at this since 3:30, and it was nearly 9. But the alternative arts program exhibition was Monday, and these kids had poured their hearts into their work. They deserved more than a rush checkmark and a generic comment. Outside, the parking lot stretched vast and empty beneath the amber glow of streetlights that barely penetrated the downpour. Her silver Honda Civic sat alone near the west entrance, looking small and vulnerable in all that darkness. Elena stood, stretching the knots from her shoulders, and walked to the window. The rain blurred everything into impressionistic streaks of light and shadow, exactly the kind of natural beauty she tried to teach her students to capture. She smiled faintly at the irony. Here she was, alone in an empty building on a Friday night, too exhausted to appreciate the very thing she spent 40 hours a week celebrating. She was about to return to her desk when movement caught her eye. 2 cars pulled into the lot below, black sedans with tinted windows that reflected nothing but rain. They moved slowly, deliberately, like sharks circling prey. Elena frowned. The school had been locked since 6. No basketball games tonight. No janitors worked this late on Fridays. The cars stopped near the far edge of the lot, headlights cutting through the rain. 4 men stepped out. Even from 3 floors up, even through the rain and darkness, Elena could see the tension in their movements. They weren't casual. They weren't lost. One of them gestured sharply, and 2 others flanked what looked like a 5th man, someone being pulled from the second vehicle. Elena's breath caught. The 5th man stumbled, his hands clearly bound behind his back. He fell to his knees in a puddle that reflected the harsh white of the headlights. One of the others, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long dark coat that hung perfectly despite the rain, stepped forward. He moved with the kind of control that made Elena's chest tighten with instinctive fear. The kneeling man looked up. Even from this distance, Elena could see his head moving, his mouth working, pleading, probably, begging. The man in the coat raised his arm. The gunshot cracked through the storm like thunder made solid. Elena jerked backward, her shoulder hitting the window frame hard enough to bruise. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling the scream that tried to claw its way out of her throat. The kneeling man collapsed face first into the rain-slicked pavement. For a moment, everything stopped. The world narrowed to that single image, a body lying motionless in a parking lot. She walked through every single day, blood spreading dark and wrong across the wet concrete. Then the man in the coat turned and looked directly up at her window. Elena's entire body went cold. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the corner of her desk, sending her coffee thermos clattering to the floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden, suffocating silence of the classroom. He saw me. Oh God, he saw me. Her mind raced, fragmented thoughts crashing into each other. Call the police. Run. Hide. Lock the door. Move. Move. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, but her fingers were slick with sudden sweat, and the screen wouldn't unlock. The classroom door was still open. She always left it open when she worked late, some superstitious habit about not feeling trapped. Stupid. So stupid. Elena forced her legs to work, stumbling toward the door. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out the rain, drowning out thought itself. She slammed the door shut and turned the lock, then immediately second-guessed herself. Locked in. You just locked yourself in. She pressed her back against the door, trying to think through the panic. The main entrance was locked. The building was secure. They couldn't get in. They couldn't... The distant sound of shattering glass echoed up from somewhere below. Elena's blood turned to ice. They were inside. She looked around the classroom wildly. 28 desks, cabinets full of art supplies, wide windows that didn't open, one door, the only exit. She was trapped in a third-floor room with nowhere to go and no way out. The fire exit. The thought struck her like electricity. The east stairwell had an emergency exit that led to the faculty parking lot. If she could make it down 3 flights without being seen, if she could reach her car, she didn't let herself finish the thought. She just moved. Elena eased the classroom door open, wincing at every tiny sound. The hallway stretched empty and dark in both directions, lit only by the red glow of exit signs. Rain hammered against the windows, providing cover. Maybe enough cover. She slipped off her heels, holding them in one hand, and ran. Her bare feet made almost no sound on the cold linoleum, past the senior lockers, past the guidance office, past the trophy case that reflected her terrified face as a pale blur. The east stairwell door was just ahead, its exit sign glowing like salvation. She hit the door at full speed and plunged into the concrete stairwell. Her footsteps echoed despite her efforts at silence, bouncing off the painted cinder block walls. Down one flight. Down another. Second floor. She paused at the landing, breathing hard, listening. Below her, nothing but the ambient hum of the building's heating system and the muffled roar of rain against the exterior walls. Maybe they didn't know which floor she'd been on. Maybe they were searching the wrong... Check the stairwells. The voice drifted up from below, calm, authoritative, with an accent Elena couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. The words were slightly muffled but unmistakable in their intent. Elena's heart stopped. She couldn't go down. She couldn't go back up. She was caught between floors with nowhere to hide except the second-floor hallway door. She pushed through it as quietly as she could manage and found herself in the science wing. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of gray and shadow. The bathrooms were at the end of the hall, the girls' room with its broken lock that maintenance kept promising to fix. It wasn't much, but it was something. Elena ran, her bare feet silent on the floor, and pushed into the bathroom. The space was small, outdated, with 3 stalls and a row of sinks beneath mirrors that had lost their silver backing in spots. She ducked into the far stall and locked it, then climbed onto the toilet, pressing herself against the wall, trying to make her body as small as possible. Her phone. She still had her phone. Elena pulled it from her pocket with trembling hands and finally managed to unlock it. No signal. The concrete and steel construction of the old building created dead zones throughout. She'd complained about it during faculty meetings, angry that she couldn't get reception in half the building. Now that complaint felt like prophecy. She tried anyway, dialing 911 with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The call failed immediately. She tried again, and again. Nothing. The bathroom door opened, Elena's entire body locked up, every muscle rigid with terror. She could see through the gap in the stall door, just a thin slice of the bathroom's entrance. A shadow fell across the tile floor, footsteps, slow, deliberate. The sound of expensive leather shoes on old linoleum. "I know you're in here." The voice was different from the one in the stairwell, deeper, quieter, with that same accent but carrying a weight that made Elena's bones ache. This wasn't a subordinate following orders. This was the man who gave them. This was the killer. "I'm not going to hurt you," he continued, and somehow that calm, reasonable tone was more terrifying than any threat could have been. "But we need to talk, and we don't have much time." Elena pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to silence even her breathing. Through the gap, she could see him now, tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", wearing that dark coat she'd seen from the window. It was soaked with rain. Water dripped from his hem onto the floor in a steady rhythm that sounded like a clock counting down. He moved to the sinks, and for a surreal moment, Elena heard water running. He was washing his hands, washing away evidence, washing away a man's life like it was nothing more than dirt beneath his fingernails. "Your name is Elena Marquez," he said conversationally, still running the water. 26 years old, art teacher, third year at Lincoln High. You live alone in a studio apartment in Astoria. Your parents retired to New Mexico last year. You have a younger brother in graduate school at Berkeley who you call every Sunday night. The water shut off. Elena's vision started to tunnel. He knew her name, her age, her address, her family. How does he know all of that? You drive a 2019 Honda Civic, silver, license plate JKR 4772. It's parked in the west lot right now, completely exposed. His footsteps moved closer. 3 of my competitors saw what you saw tonight. They're on their way here. When they arrive, they'll kill you to eliminate the witness. Then they'll kill your brother, your parents, anyone who might have heard from you tonight. He stopped directly in front of her stall. Unless you come out and let me protect you. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I'm going to count to 3, he said quietly. If you don't come out, I'll leave you here for them to find. 1. Her mind raced through impossible options. Run. Where? Fight. With what? Scream. For whom? 2. She couldn't think, couldn't process. Her entire reality had splintered into fragments that wouldn't fit back together. 3. The stall door unlocked itself. Elena's hand had moved without conscious thought, driven by some survival instinct deeper than logic or fear. The door swung slowly open. The man stood there, backlit by the emergency lighting, his features cast in shadow except for his eyes, dark, sharp, utterly focused on her with an intensity that felt physical. "Smart girl," he said softly. Elena stared at him, still pressed against the bathroom stall wall, unable to make her body move. Up close, she could see him clearly despite the shadows. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark hair pushed back from his forehead, still wet from the rain. Maybe 35, maybe 40. Handsome in the way that dangerous things were often beautiful, clean lines hiding lethal intent. "Who are you?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Adriano Vieri." He said it like she should recognize the name. When she didn't react, something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe? Or amusement. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "What you just became a part of." He glanced at his watch. Expensive, platinum, catching the light. "We have approximately 4 minutes before this building becomes a war zone, so I need you to listen very carefully." Elena couldn't look away from his eyes. She expected cruelty there, violence, the cold emptiness of someone who could execute a man in a parking lot without hesitation. But what she saw was worse. Calculation, intelligence, control. "The man I killed tonight was Angelo Terranova. He stole $3 million from the Calabrese family and thought he could hide it by making deals with the Bratva and the Lucianos." Adriano spoke like he was explaining a business transaction. "His death sends a message, but witnesses complicate messages. They create liability." "I won't tell anyone." The words tumbled out desperately. "I didn't see anything. I don't even know what I saw. Please, I'll forget everything. You can't." He cut her off with quiet finality. "The moment you looked out that window, you became a loose end. And in my world, loose ends get tied up permanently." He paused. "The Calabrese family has already put a contract on you. $500,000 to whoever delivers proof you're dead. Every trigger-happy soldado in 3 states is checking your social media right now, learning your routine, planning their approach." Elena's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if the toilet hadn't been behind her. "This isn't happening. Are as corrupt as the criminals, they are as corrupt as the criminals they pretend to fight. You'll be dead by Monday. So will your family." "What's option 2? She could barely force the words out. "You come with me. Right now. You disappear completely. New identity, new life, new everything. Under my protection." Elena laughed, a broken, hysterical sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. "Why would you protect me? You just said I'm a liability." "You are." Adriano reached into his coat. Elena flinched, but he only pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward her. "But you're also leverage." The photo on his screen showed a man in an expensive suit shaking hands with someone Elena vaguely recognized. A politician, maybe, or a businessman whose face appeared on billboards. "If you're under my protection, if you're under my protection, if you're mine, They can't touch you without starting a war they'll lose. Your existence becomes a statement, a line they don't dare cross. I don't understand. You don't need to. He pocketed the phone. You just need to decide. 4 minutes is now 2 minutes. Decide, Elena. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Multiple pairs. Running. Adriano's hand moved to something beneath his coat. A gun, Elena realized with fresh terror. He didn't draw it, but his entire posture changed, coiling with readiness. Final offer, he said, his voice dropping to barely a murmur. Come with me as my wife, or die here as a witness. Choose. Your wife. The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. In name only, a contract, business. His eyes never left the bathroom door. The Calabrese family won't kill a Vieri bride without proof of betrayal. It buys you time. It buys you life. This is insane. This is reality. The footsteps were getting closer. Yes or no? Right now. Elena looked at this stranger, this killer, who stood between her and a death she couldn't even fully comprehend. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to fight, to do anything except tie herself to a man who murdered people in parking lots. But those same instincts whispered something else. You're already dead. This is your only chance. If I say yes, she managed, what happens to me? You disappear tonight. Tomorrow you become Elena Vieri. The day after, we get married. Adriano finally looked at her fully, and for just a moment, something almost human flickered in his expression. You'll be safe, protected, untouchable. But you'll belong to me, on paper, in public, in every way that matters to the families who want you dead. And if I say no? The bathroom door burst open. 3 men rushed in, younger than Adriano, harder looking, with the kind of faces that belonged in mugshots. They froze when they saw Adriano, hands moving toward weapons they didn't quite draw. Vieri! The lead man spat the name like a curse. That's Calabrese property you're standing next to. Property? Adriano's voice went cold enough to frost the air. This is my fiancée. Say that again, and I'll cut out your tongue before I kill you. Elena's heart stopped. Fiancée? The 3 men exchanged glances. The lead one sneered. The Calabrese family put a hit on her 30 minutes ago. She ain't engaged to nobody. She's been engaged to me for 6 months. Adriano pulled out his phone again, swiping through screens with his free hand while his other remained near his concealed weapon. Here. Reservation at Maria, March 15th. Tiffany's receipt for the ring, April 2nd. 67 text messages over the last 4 weeks. He turned the phone toward them. You want to call Don Calabrese and tell him you're about to murder a Vieri bride based on incomplete intelligence? The men hesitated. Elena stared at the phone screen, seeing messages she'd never sent, restaurant reservations she'd never made, a completely fabricated relationship documented in meticulous detail. He planned this. Before tonight. Before the murder. He knew. The hit went out, the lead man said, but his certainty was cracking. We got orders. You got incomplete orders based on outdated information. Adriano's tone could have cut glass. Elena witnessed nothing. She's been with me all evening. This is a territorial misunderstanding that Don Calabrese will appreciate being corrected before it escalates into something unfortunate. The word hung in the air like a threat. The 3 men looked at each other again. Finally, the leader pulled out his phone, stepping back toward the door. I'm calling this in. You do that. Adriano didn't move. Tell them Adriano Vieri is claiming protection rights. They know what that means. Elena watched this impossible scene unfold. 4 killers arguing over her life like she was a disputed package delivery. The lead man spoke rapid Italian into his phone, too fast for Elena to catch more than a few words. When he hung up, his expression had shifted from aggressive to wary. Don Calabrese wants confirmation, he said. He wants to see the ring, the papers. Proof this ain't some bullshit story you invented 10 minutes ago. Tomorrow, Adriano said. Noon, Giordano's restaurant. I'll bring everything, including my bride. And if you're lying, then you can kill us both. Adriano smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Elena had ever seen. But you're not going to like what happens between now and then if you try to collect on that hit tonight. The standoff stretched for 10 endless seconds. Then the lead man jerked his head toward the door. Tomorrow, noon, both of you better be there. They left. The bathroom door swung shut behind them with a soft hiss of the hydraulic closer. Silence rushed in to fill the space they'd occupied. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Adriano turned to her and his expression was unreadable. That bought us 18 hours, maybe less if they decide to verify my story through other channels. You lied! Elena's voice shook. All of that. The messages, the reservations, you made it up. No. Adriano pocketed his phone. I created it 3 hours ago while my people were researching you. Digital trail, credit card receipts, even a few photographs taken with AI assistance. It's not a lie if the evidence is real. That's insane. That's survival. He moved toward the bathroom door, pausing to listen before cracking it open. The hallway beyond was empty. We need to leave, now. My car is in the loading dock area. Can you walk? Elena looked down at her bare feet, at the heels she was still clutching in one hand like a talisman of her old life. I can't. Yes, you can. Adriano's voice softened just slightly. You're in shock. That's normal. But shock won't protect you from a bullet, so you're going to stand up, put on your shoes, and walk out of this building with me. Understand? She didn't understand anything, but she stood anyway, her body moving on autopilot. She slipped her heels back on, her hands trembling so badly she could barely manage the straps. Adriano watched her with that same intense focus, like she was a problem he was solving in real time. When she was ready, he opened the door fully and gestured for her to follow. They moved through the dark hallway like ghosts. Elena kept expecting more men to appear, more guns, more violence. But the school remained empty and silent except for the rain still hammering against the windows. The loading dock was on the building's north side, a place Elena had only seen from the outside where delivery trucks dropped off supplies and the maintenance crew stored equipment. Adriano led her through a series of corridors she didn't recognize, navigating with the confidence of someone who had studied the building's layout extensively. He knew, Elena thought again. He knew the school, knew the exits, planned for this. They emerged into the loading area, where a black Mercedes SUV sat waiting, engine already running. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out, tall, athletic, with short, dark hair and eyes that assessed Elena with clinical precision. This is Lucia, Adriano said, my head of security. She'll make sure we're not followed. Lucia nodded once, then got back in the driver's seat. Adriano opened the rear passenger door and gestured for Elena to get in. This was it. The final moment. The last chance to run, to fight, to choose something different. Elena looked back at the school, her classroom 3 floors up, the parking lot where a man had died, the life she'd built from student loans and hope and determination. All of it was gone now. Erased. As dead as the man bleeding out on the pavement. She got in the car. Adriano slid in beside her and pulled the door shut. Lucia accelerated smoothly, and Lincoln High School disappeared into the rain-soaked darkness behind them. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Elena sat rigid in her seat, watching the city blur past through water-streaked windows. Her mind kept trying to process, to understand, to find some logical framework for what was happening. But every thought dissolved into static. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere safe." Adriano was doing something on his phone, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "I have a penthouse in Tribeca. Secure building, private elevator, 24-hour security. You'll stay there until the wedding." "The wedding?" Elena laughed again, that same broken sound. "You're actually serious about that?" "Completely." He didn't look up from his phone. "We have 18 hours to make our fabricated engagement look real enough to satisfy Don Calabrese. That means wedding planning, legal documentation, and a crash course in being a Vieri." "I don't even know what that means." It means you're about to become one of the most protected women in New York." Adriano finally looked at her. "It also means you'll never be anonymous again. Every move you make will be watched, analyzed, used as ammunition by people who want to hurt me. Your old life, your privacy, your freedom, your identity is over. Do you understand that?" Elena stared at him. "Why are you doing this?" You could have just killed me. It would have been simpler. Yes. Adriano's expression revealed nothing. It would have been. So why didn't you? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. Because I don't kill teachers who grade papers in empty classrooms on Friday nights. I kill people who steal from my organization, betray my trust, or threaten what's mine. You've done none of those things. Yet. Yet, he agreed. But you're also useful alive. The Calabrese family has been pushing into territory they don't own. They've been testing boundaries, seeing how far they can go before I push back. Your existence as my wife sends a message. I protect what's mine, and the cost of crossing me is higher than they want to pay. So I'm a message. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. A statement. Your leverage. Adriano's tone remained matter-of-fact. Your protection. You're a strategic asset that keeps both of us alive. He paused. And you're a woman who deserves better than being executed in a high school bathroom because you stayed late to grade your students' artwork. The unexpected empathy in that last sentence hit Elena harder than any threat could have. She turned away, staring out the window, fighting against tears that wanted to fall but wouldn't come. The Mercedes pulled up to a modern high-rise in Tribeca, all glass and steel and minimalist luxury. Lucia spoke briefly into a radio, and an underground garage door rolled open. They descended into a private parking area with only a handful of vehicles, all expensive, all immaculate. This way. Adriano led Elena to a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that could have been featured in architectural magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, modern furniture in neutral tones, abstract art that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. Everything was precise, controlled, expensive, just like the man who owned it. Guest bedroom is down that hall, Adriano said, gesturing. You'll find clothes in your size in the closet. Bathroom is stocked with everything you'll need. Kitchen is fully supplied if you're hungry. Elena walked slowly into the space, her wet heels leaving small marks on the polished hardwood. How did you know my size? I have excellent researchers. Adriano removed his wet coat, revealing a perfectly tailored suit underneath. No blood. No sign that he'd killed a man less than an hour ago. There's a phone on the nightstand in your room. It's secure, encrypted, untraceable. You can call your brother if you want. Tell him you're taking a last-minute trip, visiting a friend, whatever story you think he'll believe. But keep it brief, and don't mention anything that happened tonight. What if I call the police instead? Then you'll be dead by morning, and so will your family. Adriano's tone didn't change. The NYPD has at least 40 officers on the Calabrese payroll. You make that call, and it gets routed directly to the people hunting you. I'm not the villain here, Elena. I'm the only thing standing between you and a very permanent ending. Elena wanted to argue, to insist that there had to be another way, someone else she could trust. But she'd seen the men in the bathroom. She'd heard the casual way they discussed killing her. And she'd seen Adriano lie with flawless precision, creating an entire false relationship out of digital smoke and mirrors. He was telling the truth. The police wouldn't save her. Nobody would. What happens tomorrow? She asked quietly. Tomorrow we meet with Don Calabrese. We present evidence of our engagement. We convince him that killing you creates more problems than it solves. Adriano moved to a bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. Tomorrow night, if we're still alive, we start planning a wedding. And after the wedding? After the wedding, you're protected by the Vieri name, untouchable. He raised the glass in a mock toast. Congratulations! You're about to marry into one of the most powerful crime families in North America. Elena sank onto the nearest couch, her legs finally giving out completely. I'm going to wake up. This is a nightmare, and I'm going to wake up. I wish that were true. Adriano drank his whiskey in one smooth motion. But you're awake. This is real. And the sooner you accept that, the better your chances of survival become. He set down his glass and headed toward another hallway. His private quarters, Elena assumed. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. You didn't ask for any of this. You don't deserve this. But fate doesn't care about fairness. It only cares about choices. His eyes held hers. You made the right choice tonight. Now you have to live with it. He disappeared down the hall, leaving Elena alone in a penthouse that felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. She sat there for a long time, watching the rain streak down the windows, watching the city lights blur and refract into abstract patterns her students would have tried to paint. Somewhere out there, a man was dead in a parking lot. Somewhere out there, killers were hunting her. And somewhere in this pristine, expensive cage, Elena Marquez's old life was dying too. She eventually made her way to the guest bedroom. It was as immaculate as the rest of the penthouse. King-sized bed with hotel-quality linens, modern furniture, an ensuite bathroom with heated floors, and a rainfall shower. The closet, as promised, held clothes in her exact size. Dresses, jeans, blouses, even pajamas. All expensive, all perfectly selected. He knew everything, planned everything. Elena picked up the phone from the nightstand. Her hands were steadier now, shock giving way to a numb sort of clarity. She dialed her brother's number, rehearsing the lie as it rang. "Ellie?" Tommy's voice was warm, concerned. "It's almost 11 on a Friday. You okay?" "I'm fine." The lie came easier than it should have. "Actually, something amazing happened. I met someone. It's serious, Tommy. Really serious." "Wait, what? Since when? You haven't mentioned anyone. It happened fast. He's incredible. And we're talking about moving forward. Together." Elena closed her eyes. "I might be gone for a while. Out of touch. But I'm safe. I'm happy. I just needed you to know that." "Ellie, this doesn't sound like you. Are you sure everything's—" "I have to go. I love you. Tell Mom and Dad I love them. I'll call when I can." She hung up before he could ask more questions, before the lie could crack and reveal the truth underneath. Then she lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the penthouse, Adriano Vieri was probably planning their fabricated wedding. Somewhere in the city, crime families were calculating the value of her death versus her survival. And somewhere deep inside herself, Elena felt the art teacher she'd been, the woman who stayed late to write encouraging comments on student paintings, begin to disappear. The storm raged on outside, and Elena Marquez waited for morning, knowing that when the sun rose, she would have to become someone else entirely. Morning came too fast and too bright. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that wasn't hers, wearing clothes she'd been too exhausted to change out of. For 3 blissful seconds, she thought last night had been a nightmare. Then she saw the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass, and reality crashed back with brutal clarity. She sat up slowly, her body aching from tension she'd carried through restless sleep. The penthouse was quiet except for distant sounds from somewhere deeper in the space. Low voices, maybe, or a television. Elena checked her phone. 7:43. She'd slept less than 5 hours. The guest bathroom mirror showed her exactly what she expected. Smudged makeup, tangled hair, eyes that looked haunted. She barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked like someone who'd survived something terrible, which was accurate in the worst possible way. Elena showered, letting scalding water wash away the physical residue of last night, even though it couldn't touch what remained in her mind. She kept seeing that man on his knees, kept hearing the gunshot, kept feeling the cold terror of hiding in a bathroom stall while killers hunted her. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her monthly rent, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Not the clothes from the closet, these were new. A tailored dress in deep navy, elegant but not showy. Understated jewelry. Heels that matched perfectly. A note sat beside them in precise handwriting. "Wear this. We leave at 11. Elena dressed mechanically, her hands steadier than they'd been last night. The dress fit perfectly, of course. Everything in this gilded cage fit perfectly because Adriano Vieri left nothing to chance. She found him in the main living area, seated at a dining table she hadn't noticed last night, surrounded by papers and what looked like legal documents. He'd changed into a different suit, charcoal gray, impeccably cut, and was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian with the kind of authority that made it clear he wasn't asking for anything. He was commanding. He glanced up when Elena approached, his eyes taking in her appearance with clinical assessment. He said something else in Italian, then ended the call. "Coffee's in the kitchen," he said. "There's food if you're hungry." "I'm not." Elena's voice sounded strange to her own ears, flat, distant. What are those papers? Our engagement documentation. Adriano gestured to the spread before him. Legal contracts, financial disclosures, prenuptial agreements, everything Don Calabrese will expect to see. Elena moved closer, looking down at documents that might as well have been written in another language for all the sense they made. These look real. They are real. I had my attorneys work through the night. He picked up one document, scanning it. This is a binding prenuptial agreement that protects both our assets in the event of divorce. This one establishes a joint trust for any future children, standard in arranged marriages within the families. Future children. Elena's laugh was bitter. You think of everything. I have to. Adriano set down the papers and looked at her directly. Don Calabrese isn't stupid. He'll scrutinize every detail, look for any inconsistency. If he finds one, we're both dead. The casual way he said it, like discussing the weather, made Elena's stomach turn. How can you be so calm about this? Because panic gets people killed. He stood, moving to pour himself coffee from a French press on the sideboard. I've been navigating these waters my entire life. You learn to stay calm or you drown. Elena watched him move through the space with that same controlled grace he'd shown last night. Nothing wasted. Nothing uncertain. Who are you really? You said your name like I should know it. Adriano smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. My family has been in New York for 4 generations. We control shipping, construction, waste management, and various other enterprises across the Northeast. The Vieri name carries weight. It carries fear. And it carries expectations I've been meeting since I was 16 years old. You mean crime? Elena said it flatly. You're a crime boss. I prefer CEO of alternative business ventures. The smile turned sardonic. But yes, crime boss is accurate if reductive. And now you're forcing me to marry you. I'm offering you protection in exchange for legitimacy. Adriano's tone sharpened. There's a difference. You can walk out that door right now if you want. I won't stop you, but you'll be dead before sunset, and so will your family. That's not a threat. That's reality. Elena wanted to argue, to find some flaw in his logic, some escape route he hadn't considered, but she'd spent half the night thinking through every possibility, and they all ended the same way. How long? She asked quietly. How long do I have to be your wife? Until the heat dies down. 6 months. Maybe a year? Adriano returned to the table, gathering papers into a leather portfolio. After that, we can arrange a quiet separation. You'll be set up somewhere safe, new identity, enough money to start over. The marriage will have served its purpose. And you just let me go? Why wouldn't I? He looked genuinely puzzled by the question. You're not a prisoner, Elena. You're a strategic asset who happens to be a civilian caught in a situation she didn't create. Once you're no longer useful as my wife, you're free to live whatever life you choose. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made Elena feel hollow. She was a transaction, a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Nothing about this was personal. Not the protection, not the marriage, not even the careful way he'd selected her clothes. What happens at this meeting? She asked, changing the subject before the emptiness could swallow her. We meet Don Calabrese at Giordano's restaurant. It's neutral territory, public enough to discourage violence, private enough for honest conversation. Adriano checked his watch. We'll present our documentation, answer his questions, and convince him that you're more valuable alive than dead. If he accepts our story, the hit gets called off. If he doesn't, we die. Probably. Adriano said it without emotion. Though I have contingencies in place. Lucia will be nearby with a tactical team. I have leverage on 3 of Don Calabrese's senior lieutenants, and I've made it clear that if I disappear, certain information goes public that would destroy half the organized crime infrastructure in New York. Mutually assured destruction. Exactly. He smiled, and this time it was genuine, the smile of a man who understood violence as a language. The key to survival isn't being the strongest. It's making sure killing you costs more than keeping you alive. Elena absorbed that, adding it to the growing collection of terrifying insights into Adriano's world. What do I need to do? Act like you loved me. He said it matter-of-factly. Don Calabrese will be watching for genuine affection. He's seen arranged marriages before. He'll know if we're faking. How am I supposed to fake loving someone I met 12 hours ago who killed a man in front of me? Adriano studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. You're not faking love. You're performing it. There's a difference. He moved closer, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. Love is a story we tell through small gestures. The way you look at someone, how you respond to their touch, the unconscious lean toward them when they speak. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were warm, gentle, nothing like the hands that had held a gun last night. Like this, he said softly. Small intimacies that look natural. That's all you need to sell. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Standing this close, she could see the fine details of his face, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the precise line of his jaw, the way his eyes held depths she couldn't begin to map. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, like a blade that caught the light. What if I can't do it? She whispered. Then we both die. And this conversation becomes irrelevant. Adriano's hand dropped away. But I don't think that's going to happen. You're stronger than you realize, Elena. You proved that last night when you chose survival over panic. Before Elena could respond, Lucia appeared from another room. She'd changed since last night, now wearing a tailored pantsuit that didn't quite hide the weapon at her hip. The route is secure, she said. 3 chase cars, 2 decoys, and I've got eyes on every approach to Giordano's. If this is a trap, we'll see it coming. Good. Adriano gathered the portfolio. Elena, this is important. Once we leave this building, we're performing every second. No breaking character, no hesitation. You're Elena Marquez, my fiancée of 6 months, madly in love and excited about our future together. Can you do that? Elena thought about her students, about the time she'd encouraged them to step outside their comfort zones, to try techniques that scared them, to be braver than they felt. She'd always believed art required courage. Apparently, so did survival. Yes, she said. I can do that. The drive to Giordano's took 25 minutes through Manhattan traffic. Elena sat beside Adriano in the back of the Mercedes, acutely aware of his presence beside her. He'd taken her hand shortly after they left the building, a casual gesture that looked natural but felt electric. Breathe, he murmured, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. You're holding tension in your shoulders. Relax. Easy for you to say. But Elena tried, forcing her muscles to uncoil incrementally. Tell me something real, Adriano said suddenly. Something about your life before last night. Elena glanced at him, confused. Why? Because Don Calabrese might ask questions about our relationship. We need details, real ones. His eyes held hers. Tell me about your art. It was so unexpected that Elena almost laughed. My art? You teach it. You must love it. Adriano's expression was genuinely curious. What made you want to be an art teacher? Elena looked out the window, watching the city blur past. My high school art teacher saw something in me that nobody else did. I was invisible most of my life, quiet, unremarkable, just there. But Mrs. Chen looked at my work and told me I had vision, that I saw the world in ways other people couldn't. Did she? I don't know. Maybe. Elena's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. She made me believe I mattered, that what I created had value. When she died my senior year, I decided I wanted to do that for other kids, be the person who sees them. Adriano was quiet for a moment. That's beautiful, he said finally, and he sounded like he meant it. That's the kind of detail that makes a story real. Remember that feeling when we walk into Giordano's? Remember why you became a teacher. Let Don Calabrese see that you're a real person, not just a witness to eliminate. Well, why would that matter to him? Because even criminals have lines they prefer not to cross. Adriano's hand tightened on hers. Killing a teacher who helps invisible kids feel seen, that carries different weight than killing a random witness. It makes you human, sympathetic. Elena understood then. This wasn't just about fake engagement documents and manufactured intimacy. It was about making her murder cost something emotionally, not just strategically. You've done this before, she said quietly, used people's humanity against them. I've survived in a world where humanity is often the only leverage that works. Adriano met her eyes. I'm not a good man, Elena. I won't pretend otherwise. But I'm very good at keeping people alive when it serves my interests. Right now, keeping you alive serves both of us. Giordano's restaurant occupied a corner building in Little Italy, old-world elegance, with red leather booths, dark wood paneling, and the kind of atmosphere that whispered of deals made in shadowed corners. The lunch crowd was sparse, and Elena immediately spotted the men who weren't there for the food. They sat at strategic points throughout the restaurant, their eyes tracking every movement with professional intensity. Security, enforcers, killers waiting for orders. Adriano squeezed her hand once, a warning or reassurance, Elena couldn't tell which, and led her toward a private booth in the back. Don Salvatore Calabrese sat like a king holding court, flanked by two men who radiated barely controlled violence. He was older than Elena expected, maybe 70, with silver hair combed back from a lined face that had seen decades of brutality. His eyes were sharp, though, missing nothing as Adriano and Elena approached. Adriano. The Don's voice carried the weight of old authority. You bring interesting company to our lunch. Don Calabrese. Adriano's tone was respectful but not subservient. May I introduce my fiancée, Elena Marquez? Elena forced herself to smile, to meet the Don's eyes without flinching. It's an honor to meet you. An honor. Don Calabrese's smile was thin. Interesting choice of words for a woman who witnessed a murder less than 24 hours ago. The directness of it hit Elena like a physical blow, but Adriano's hand remained steady on her back. Elena witnessed me leaving a business meeting, Adriano said smoothly. Nothing more. The confusion is understandable given the timing, but I assure you she was nowhere near the Terranova situation. Really? Don Calabrese gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. Explain to me how your fiancé of 6 months was working late at Lincoln High School, alone, at the exact time and location where Angelo Terranova met his unfortunate end. They slid into the booth. Elena's heart was racing, but she kept her expression calm, letting Adriano take the lead. Elena works long hours, Adriano said, opening his portfolio. She's dedicated to her students, sometimes too dedicated. I was supposed to pick her up at 9, but my meeting with Terranova ran late. By the time I arrived, she was already in her car, heading home. Convenient timing. Not convenient? Documented. Adriano spread papers across the table. Text messages between us discussing dinner plans. Security footage from her building showing her arrival at 9:47. Traffic camera data showing my route from the meeting location to her school, a route that doesn't intersect with the parking lot where Terranova died. Don Calabrese examined the documents with methodical attention. Elena held her breath, knowing that every piece of evidence was fabricated, that one wrong detail could unravel everything. And the engagement? Don Calabrese looked up. 6 months, you claim. Yet I hear no talk of weddings, no announcements. Strange for a man who usually broadcasts his victories. This isn't a victory, it's personal. Adriano's tone softened, and he looked at Elena with an expression that seemed almost genuine. I wanted to keep her separate from all of this. From the business, from the politics, from men who would use her to hurt me. That's why we kept it quiet. How romantic. The Don's sarcasm was cutting. And now, suddenly, you parade her in front of me after she becomes a witness to murder. You understand my skepticism. I understand your concern. Adriano leaned forward. But killing Elena accomplishes nothing except starting a war neither of us can afford. She's not a threat. She didn't see anything actionable. And she's about to become a Vieri, which means touching her is touching my family. The booth went silent. Elena could feel the weight of that statement settling over the table like a physical presence. Don Calabrese studied them both for a long, excruciating moment. Then he turned to Elena directly. Tell me, Miss Marquez, do you love him? The question caught Elena off guard. She'd expected interrogation about the murder, about what she'd seen, about the timeline. Not this. Yes. The word came out softer than she intended, but something in Adriano's earlier words came back to her. Act like you love me. She thought about Mrs. Chen, about being seen, about the strange protectiveness Adriano had shown despite being a killer. I know how it looks. I know it seems impossible. But yes, I love him. Why? Elena took a breath, reaching for something true even in the lie. Because he sees me. My whole life I've been invisible. Just another face in the crowd, another teacher in another classroom. But Adriano looks at me like I'm the only person in the room, like I matter. Adriano's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing gently. And you're willing to marry into this life, Don Calabrese pressed? Knowing what he does? What we all do? I'm willing to marry the man I love. Elena met his eyes steadily. Whatever comes with that, I'll face it together with him. Don Calabrese sat back, his expression unreadable. He exchanged glances with his lieutenants, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, he spoke. I want a wedding invitation, he said, and I want it within 2 weeks. You marry this girl publicly, Adriano, or my people finish what they started. Done, Adriano said immediately. You'll have your invitation within 48 hours. And if I discover this is an elaborate fiction designed to protect a witness, then you can kill us both at the reception. Adriano's smile was cold. But it's not fiction, Don Calabrese. It's the future of the Vieri family. The Don studied them for another long moment. Then he stood, his men rising with him. 2 weeks, he repeated. Don't make me regret showing mercy, Adriano. He left without another word, his security detail flowing out of the restaurant like a dark tide. Only when they were gone did Elena realize she'd been holding her breath. Did that work? She whispered. Yes. Adriano was already gathering the papers, his movements quick and efficient. But now we actually have to get married. 2 weeks isn't much time. They left through the back entrance where Lucia was waiting with the car. Elena felt lightheaded, reality tilting sideways again. She'd just convinced a crime boss that she loved a man she barely knew. And now she had 14 days to turn that lie into something convincing enough to survive public scrutiny. The drive back to the penthouse passed in silence. Elena stared out the window, watching the city rush past, feeling like a passenger in her own life. Back in the penthouse, Adriano immediately got on the phone, barking orders in a mix of English and Italian. Elena wandered to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. We need a wedding planner, Adriano was saying. Someone discreet. Someone who can put together a convincing ceremony in 2 weeks. No, not convincing. Perfect. It has to be perfect. Elena closed her eyes. 2 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been whether the school's budget would cover new easels for the spring semester. Now she was planning a marriage to a crime boss to save her life. Elena. She turned. Adriano had ended his call and was watching her with that same intense focus. I need you to make a list, he said. Everyone you would have invited to your real wedding. Family, friends, colleagues, anyone whose absence would seem strange. You're actually inviting people I know? We have to. Don Calabrese will be watching for authenticity. Adriano moved to the bar, pouring them both drinks. Your brother needs to be your best man or give you away. Whichever feels more natural. Your parents need to attend. Your close friends need to be there, celebrating. They'll have questions. Elena accepted the glass he offered, though she didn't drink. My parents will want to meet you beforehand. Tommy will demand to know everything about you. My friend Rachel will see through any lie I try to tell. Then we tell them a version of the truth. Adriano sat across from her. We met 6 months ago. We kept it quiet because you wanted to make sure it was real before introducing me to your family. We fell in love faster than either of us expected, and now we're ready to make it official. And when they ask what you do for a living? Import, export, shipping logistics, legitimate businesses, which I actually do own, among other things. He smiled slightly. I'm very good at appearing legitimate, Elena. It's how I've stayed alive this long. Elena finally took a sip of her drink. Whiskey, smooth and expensive. It burned going down. This is insane. Yes, Adriano didn't argue. But it's the insanity that keeps us alive. So we embrace it, we perform it perfectly, and we survive. Over the next 7 days, Elena's life became an accelerated blur of wedding planning and manufactured intimacy. Adriano hired a wedding planner, a severe woman named Mrs. Castellano, who somehow found Elena's perfect dress in 48 hours and booked an elegant venue in Brooklyn with impossible speed. Elena called her parents in New Mexico, delivering the rehearsed story with shaking hands. Her mother cried with joy. Her father demanded to meet Adriano immediately, which resulted in an awkward video call where Adriano charmed them with practiced ease, discussing his legitimate business ventures and his deep love for their daughter. Tommy flew in from Berkeley, suspicious and protective, demanding to meet his future brother-in-law in person. Elena watched nervously as Adriano took her brother to dinner, wondering what lies he would tell, what truth he might reveal. But Tommy came back convinced, even enthusiastic. "He's intense," Tommy told Elena over coffee the next morning, "but he looks at you like you're the center of his universe. That's all I needed to see." Elena smiled and said nothing, thinking about how good Adriano was at manufacturing exactly what people needed to see. The strangest part was how natural it started to feel. Adriano coached her through couple behaviors. How to stand close without seeming uncomfortable. How to laugh at his stories. How to touch his arm or his hand in casual affection. They practiced over dinners in the penthouse, over morning coffee, during car rides to meet with vendors and family members. And somewhere in the performance, the lines began to blur. Elena found herself noticing small things about him. The way he always poured her coffee first. How he listened when she talked about her students, actually engaged rather than just waiting for his turn to speak. The rare moments when his carefully controlled expression cracked and something genuine showed through. Usually amusement at her honest reactions to his world. "You're adapting well," he told her one evening, 5 days before the wedding. They were reviewing seating charts, making sure rival families were placed strategically to avoid violence at the reception. "I don't know if that's good or bad." Elena traced a finger along the table plan. "I should be more horrified by all of this." "You're in survival mode, it's normal." Adriano made a note on the chart. "After the wedding, after the immediate threat passes, you'll probably have a delayed reaction. That's normal too. And you'll just handle it? I'll make sure you have support. Therapy, if you need it. Space, if you prefer." He looked up. "Whatever helps you process this nightmare I've dragged you into." The genuine concern in his voice caught Elena off guard. "Why do you care?" "Because you didn't ask for any of this." Adriano set down his pen. "You stayed late to grade papers and ended up in hell. The least I can do is make sure you come out the other side intact." Elena studied his face, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the strategic reason behind his kindness. But all she saw was sincerity, or something so close to it that the difference didn't matter. "Who are you really?" she asked softly, under all the control and strategy and performance. Adriano was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not sure anymore," he finally said. "I've been playing roles for so long that I've forgotten which parts are real." "That's sad. That's survival." But he smiled slightly. "Though lately, with you, I'm remembering what it feels like to be honest, even when we're lying." The wedding arrived with startling speed. Elena woke on that Saturday morning in the penthouse guest room that had become her temporary home, staring at the dress hanging on the closet door. Ivory silk, elegant and understated, exactly what she would have chosen for her real wedding. She thought about calling it off, running, finding some escape route Adriano hadn't anticipated, but she thought about the men in the bathroom, about Don Calabrese's cold eyes, about the casual way they'd discussed eliminating her like she was a math problem to solve. And she got dressed. The ceremony took place at a historic brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, its garden transformed into an intimate venue with white flowers and soft lighting. Elena's parents sat in the front row, her mother crying happy tears. Tommy stood beside her as her man of honor, looking proud and protective. And scattered throughout the assembled guests were men Elena now recognized: Adriano's security, Don Calabrese's enforcers, representatives from families whose names she'd learned to fear. All of them watching, evaluating, looking for any sign that this marriage was anything other than genuine. Adriano stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and completely composed. When Elena walked down the aisle, on her father's arm, Adriano's expression shifted into something that looked almost like wonder. "You're beautiful," he murmured when she reached him, and Elena couldn't tell if he meant it or if it was just another line in their performance. The officiant began speaking, words about love and commitment that felt surreal given the circumstances. Elena barely heard them. She was too focused on Adriano's eyes, on the weight of what they were doing, on the impossible reality that she was marrying a killer to save her life. Do you, Adriano Vieri, take Elena Marquez to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was steady, certain. And do you, Elena Marquez, take Adriano Vieri to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it, the final moment, the point of no return. Elena thought about Mrs. Chen, about being seen, about survival and choice, and the narrow path between death and whatever came next. I do, she said. Adriano slipped a ring onto her finger, platinum and diamonds, beautiful and binding. You may kiss the bride. Adriano cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away, to refuse. But Elena leaned in, closing the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that was supposed to be performance but felt like something more. The guests applauded. Elena's mother sobbed happily. Don Calabrese watched from his seat with an expression that gave away nothing, and Elena Vieri, no longer Marquez, stepped into a future she couldn't predict, and a marriage that was supposed to mean nothing but somehow felt like everything. The reception blurred into champagne toasts and forced smiles, and the constant awareness of eyes watching every gesture. Elena danced with her father, who whispered how proud he was, how happy he seemed that she'd found someone who clearly adored her. She laughed at the right moments, posed for photographs with Adriano's hand possessively on her waist, and pretended her heart wasn't racing with the knowledge that half the guests were armed. Don Calabrese approached them during dinner, his presence parting the crowd like a dark tide. Elena's hand tightened on her wine glass, but Adriano remained perfectly relaxed beside her. A beautiful ceremony, the Don said, his weathered face revealing nothing. Your bride is radiant, Adriano. Thank you. Adriano's arm slid around Elena's shoulders, pulling her close. We're grateful you could celebrate with us. Of course. Don Calabrese's eyes moved to Elena. Tell me, Mrs. Vieri, how does it feel to be married? The name hit her like cold water. Mrs. Vieri, she was actually married. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was legal, binding, real. It feels right, Elena managed, finding her voice beneath the panic. Like everything before this was just waiting for this moment. Romantic. The Don's smile was thin. I hope that feeling lasts. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To the happy couple. May your union be long and prosperous. He walked away, leaving the unspoken threat hanging in the air like smoke. Breathe, Adriano murmured against her ear, his lips brushing her temple in what looked like affection but felt like instruction. You're doing perfectly, just a few more hours. But the hours stretched endlessly. Elena smiled until her face ached, accepted congratulations from people whose names she'd never remember, and danced with her new husband while his world watched for cracks in their facade. When Adriano held her during their first dance, his hand steady on her back, his breath warm against her hair, Elena felt something shift inside her chest. He was a killer, a crime boss, a man who'd manufactured their entire relationship to serve his strategic interests. But in this moment, with soft music playing and his dark eyes holding hers, she almost forgot those truths. What happens now? She whispered as they swayed together. Now we take our honeymoon. Adriano's voice was low enough that only she could hear. I've arranged 3 weeks on the Amalfi Coast. Private villa, maximum security, complete isolation from everything here. A honeymoon? Elena laughed softly, the sound edged with hysteria. Of course, because that's what newlyweds do. Because that's what Don Calabrese expects. Adriano's hand tightened slightly on her waist. And because you need distance from all of this before it breaks you. The concern in his voice caught her off guard again. You keep acting like you care. Maybe I do. His eyes searched hers. Would that be so impossible? Before Elena could answer, the song ended. Adriano stepped back, the moment dissolving, and they were swept into more toasts, more photographs, more performance. Finally, mercifully, the reception ended. Elena said goodbye to her parents, her mother still crying, her father shaking Adriano's hand with gruff approval, and to Tommy, who pulled her into a fierce hug. "You happy?" he asked quietly. Elena thought about the truth, about gunshots and bathroom stalls and marriage contracts designed to prevent murder. But she looked at her brother's concerned face and said, "Yes, I'm happy." She'd become good at lying. That realization should have disturbed her more than it did. Lucia drove them back to the penthouse through late-night Manhattan traffic. Elena sat beside Adriano in exhausted silence, the weight of the day finally crashing down on her. She was married. She was Elena Vieri. Her old life had officially ended, replaced by something she still couldn't fully comprehend. At the penthouse, Adriano poured them both drinks, something stronger than champagne. Elena accepted hers gratefully, sinking onto the couch, still wearing her wedding dress. "We leave for Italy tomorrow afternoon," Adriano said, settling beside her but maintaining careful distance. "Lucia will handle security arrangements here. My second-in-command will manage business operations. For 3 weeks, we disappear. Into paradise." Elena's laugh was bitter. How romantic. "Into safety." Adriano's tone was firm. The wedding satisfied Don Calabresi's requirements. The honeymoon gives us time to let tensions cool, let the families adjust to our new status. When we return, you'll be established as my wife, untouchable. And then what? We just live like this? Pretending forever? We live like this until it's safe to stop. Adriano studied his drink. "I told you, 6 months, maybe a year. Then we reassess." Elena wanted to argue, to demand more certainty, more control over her own future, but exhaustion won. She finished her drink and stood, the silk of her wedding dress rustling softly. "I should sleep," she said. "Long flight tomorrow." "Elena." Adriano stood too, and for a moment they just looked at each other, husband and wife, strangers bound by necessity, two people caught in an impossible situation. "You were remarkable today. I know this isn't what you wanted, but you handled it with more grace than I had any right to expect." The compliment landed softly, unexpectedly warming something in Elena's chest. "I had a good teacher. You're very convincing when you want to be." "So are you." His smile was genuine. "Sleep well, Mrs. Vieri." The name still felt strange, but Elena didn't correct him. She just nodded and retreated to her room, closing the door on her wedding day and everything it represented. The flight to Italy departed at 3 the next afternoon. Elena had never flown first class before, much less on a private jet. But Adriano's world operated on a different level entirely. Luxury as standard, excess as baseline expectation. The jet's interior was all cream leather and polished wood, with seats that reclined into beds and a flight attendant who appeared the moment they settled in, offering champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. "I could get used to this," Elena murmured, accepting a glass despite the early hour. That's the dangerous part. Adriano was already working on his laptop, handling what he called transition details for his absence. Luxury becomes normal very quickly. Then you forget what real life looks like. Is this not real life? This is insulation from real life. He glanced up. Money doesn't make problems disappear. It just makes them quieter, easier to ignore. But they're still there, underneath. Elena studied him, this man who was now her husband, trying to understand the contradictions. "You sound like you hate it. The money, the power." "I don't hate it. I just understand its cost." Adriano closed his laptop. "My father built this empire through violence and fear. I inherited it at 23 when he was killed by a rival family. I've spent 13 years maintaining what he created, expanding it, making it untouchable. But I've never asked myself if it's what I actually want." The honesty surprised Elena. "What would you want? If you could choose?" Adriano was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at clouds they were climbing through. "I don't know," he finally said. "I've never let myself think about it. Wanting something different feels like weakness in my world, and weakness gets you killed." "That's a terrible way to live." "Yes," he met her eyes, "but it's kept me alive." The flight stretched into evening as they chased the sunset east across the Atlantic. Elena tried to sleep but couldn't, too wired with residual adrenaline and the strangeness of everything. Eventually she gave up and joined Adriano in the main cabin, where he'd abandoned his laptop in favor of a book. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. I rarely sleep well. He set down the book, something in Italian that Elena couldn't read. Too many people want me dead. Makes relaxation difficult. Elena settled into the seat across from him. Do you ever regret it? The life you chose? I didn't choose it. I inherited it. Adriano's expression was unreadable. But if you're asking if I regret the things I've done to stay alive and keep my family's power intact, that's more complicated. Complicated how? I've killed 16 people personally, ordered the deaths of 43 others. I've destroyed lives, broken families, perpetuated cycles of violence that will outlive me. He said it flatly, without emotion. But I've also protected hundreds of people who depend on me. I've built legitimate businesses that employ thousands. I've used my influence to stop worse men from doing worse things. That doesn't balance out. No, it doesn't. Adriano's eyes held hers. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've never pretended otherwise. But I'm trying to be better than my father was. That's the best I can offer. Elena thought about the man kneeling in the rain, about the gunshot that had shattered her life. The man you killed, Terranova. Did he deserve it? Does anyone deserve execution? Adriano's smile was sad. He stole from dangerous people and tried to play families against each other. He knew the risks. He chose poorly. And yes, if I hadn't killed him, someone else would have. Probably more painfully. That doesn't make it right. No, it just makes it reality. He leaned forward. I can't change what I am, Elena. I can't undo the things I've done. All I can do is try to minimize the damage going forward and protect the people who matter to me. Do I matter to you? The question escaped before Elena could stop it. Adriano studied her for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly, more than you probably should. The admission hung between them, honest and dangerous and impossible to take back. They landed in Naples as dawn broke over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that reminded Elena why she'd fallen in love with art in the first place. A car waited to take them south along winding coastal roads that hugged cliffs overlooking impossibly blue water. The villa sat perched above the sea near Positano, a restored 18th century estate with terracotta roofs and gardens that cascaded down toward the water. It was beautiful in a way that made Elena's chest ache, the kind of place she'd seen in travel magazines and never imagined experiencing. This is where you honeymoon? She asked as they walked through rooms filled with antiques and original artwork. This is where I disappear when the world becomes too much. Adriano opened French doors onto a terrace that overlooked the coast. My mother loved it here. She died when I was 12, but I kept the villa in her memory. It was the most personal thing he'd shared. Elena moved onto the terrace, breathing in salt air and Mediterranean sun. It's extraordinary. It's safe. Adriano joined her at the railing. 8-foot walls, sophisticated security system, loyal staff who've been with the family for generations. We can actually relax here. Relax seemed like a foreign concept, but as days blurred into a week, Elena found herself unwinding incrementally. The villa existed outside the chaos of New York, outside the constant performance and threat. Here, she could almost pretend they were a normal couple on a normal honeymoon. They fell into unexpected rhythms. Morning coffee on this terrace overlooking the sea, long lunches with local wine and fresh seafood, evenings walking through Positano's steep streets, holding hands because it had become habit rather than performance. Adriano was different here too, less controlled, less constantly vigilant. He laughed more easily, shared stories from his childhood, showed her parts of himself he kept locked away in New York. Elena found herself responding in kind, talking about her art, her students, her dreams before everything had shattered. You should paint again, Adriano said one afternoon as they sat on the terrace. When we return to New York, you shouldn't give up something you love just because your circumstances changed. My circumstances? Elena laughed softly. That's one way to describe being forced into marriage to survive assassination. I prefer strategically partnered for mutual benefit. His smile was wry. But yes, your circumstances, which don't have to define your entire existence. Elena watched waves crash against rocks far below. I don't know if I can go back to teaching. How do I stand in front of high school students knowing what I know, married to what you are? You teach them anyway. You show them that art matters, that they matter, that being seen is possible even in darkness. Adriano's voice was surprisingly gentle. That's not weakness, Elena. That's the strongest thing you could do. You sound like you believe that. I do. He turned to face her fully. My world is built on violence and fear, but people like you, people who create beauty and see potential in invisible kids, you're what makes civilization worth protecting, even if protection requires getting my hands dirty. Elena looked at him, this complicated man who killed people and quoted philosophy, who'd forced her into marriage but showed her unexpected kindness. I don't know what you are, Adriano. Monster or savior or something in between. I'm human. He reached for her hand, his touch now familiar rather than frightening. Flawed, dangerous, trying to do better, and usually failing. But human. The barriers between them had been eroding since the wedding. In Italy, away from performance and threat, they dissolved entirely. Elena stopped sleeping in the guest room after the 5th night, moving into Adriano's space because the distance felt more artificial than the intimacy. Nothing happened that first night. They just lay beside each other in the darkness, talking until exhaustion claimed them, but it shifted something fundamental between them. The second week blurred into the third, and Elena realized with growing alarm that she didn't want to leave. The villa had become a sanctuary, and Adriano had become something more complicated than the man who'd killed someone in front of her. What are you thinking? He asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the Mediterranean in impossible colors. I'm thinking this ends soon. Elena's voice was quiet. We go back to New York, back to reality, back to pretending. Is this not real? Adriano's arm tightened around her waist. What we've built here. I don't know what this is. Elena turned to face him. You said 6 months of marriage, then freedom. But this doesn't feel like a temporary arrangement anymore. No? Adriano's dark eyes held hers with intensity that made her breath catch. It doesn't. So what is it? I don't know. His honesty was stark. I planned for a strategic marriage. I didn't plan for you. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Adriano, he kissed her, cutting off whatever she'd been about to say. It was different from their wedding kiss, not performance, not strategy, but genuine want. Elena responded without thinking, her hand sliding into his hair, her body pressing against his with urgency that surprised them both. They stumbled back into the villa, shedding clothes and careful control, finding each other with desperate intensity that felt nothing like pretense and everything like truth. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like sea air and complicated decisions, Elena stared at the ceiling and tried to process what had just happened. We shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Probably not. Adriano's fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Does that make you regret it? Elena thought about the question honestly. No. Does it make you? No. He pulled her closer. But it complicates everything. Everything was already complicated. Fair point. His laugh rumbled through his chest. Elena, I need you to understand something. This marriage was supposed to be business, protection in exchange for legitimacy, clean, simple, temporary. I know. But I'm not a good actor when it comes to you. Adriano's voice was rough. Whatever this is between us, it stopped being fake the moment you walked down that aisle. Maybe before. Elena rolled to face him, studying his features in the dim light. You're saying this is real? What we have? I'm saying I don't know how to separate performance from feeling anymore when it comes to you. His hand cupped her face. And that terrifies me more than any threat I've ever faced. Why? Because caring about someone in my world makes them a target, makes them leverage, makes them vulnerable. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I can protect you from the Calabrese family, from rival organizations, from external threats, but I can't protect you from what loving me might cost. Who said anything about love? Elena kept her voice light, but her heart was racing. Elena. Adriano's expression was stark. I've killed people for looking at me wrong. I've destroyed lives without hesitation when it served my interests. But I'm terrified of hurting you. That's not strategy. That's not performance. That's something I haven't felt since I was too young to know better. The confession settled between them, honest and dangerous. I should run, Elena whispered. I should take whatever exit you offered and disappear before this gets more complicated. Yes, you should. Adriano didn't look away. But you're not going to, are you? No, Elena smiled despite everything. Apparently I make terrible decisions now. Must be the influence of my criminal husband. Terrible influence. But Adriano was smiling too, genuine warmth replacing his usual control. Elena Vieri, what have you done to me? Nothing you didn't do to yourself? She kissed him softly. We're both making terrible decisions. At least we're doing it together. They spent the final days of their honeymoon pretending the real world didn't exist, but reality waited patiently, and on their last morning at the villa, Adriano received a call that shattered their temporary peace. Elena watched his expression shift from relaxed to dangerously focused as he listened to whoever was speaking. When he hung up, his face was carved from stone. What happened? She asked. Marco Santoro. Adriano's voice was flat. One of my senior lieutenants. He's been feeding information to the Luciano family. 3 of my shipments were intercepted last week. 2 of my men were killed. Elena's blood ran cold. Betrayal. Yes. Adriano was already moving, pulling on clothes, his entire demeanor shifting back into the controlled violence she'd seen that first night. We need to leave. Now. Why now? What's changed? Santoro knows we're here, knows we're vulnerable. Adriano was packing with quick efficiency. The Lucianos are making a move. They're coming for us, Elena, and they're not going to wait for us to get back to New York. Fear spiked through Elena's chest. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Adriano pulled out his phone, already dialing. Lucia is arranging extraction, but we need to secure the villa until she arrives. As if summoned by his words, gunfire shattered the morning calm. Elena froze as the sound of automatic weapons ripped through the air, distant but getting closer. Adriano grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the windows. Stay low, he commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. Move to the safe room, now. But Elena couldn't move, paralyzed by terror as the gunfire intensified. This was real. This was happening. The sanctuary had become a trap. Adriano grabbed her face, forcing her to focus on him. Elena, listen to me. You're going to survive this, but I need you to move. Can you do that? She nodded, finding some core of strength beneath the fear. Good. Adriano released her, pulling a gun from somewhere she hadn't known he kept weapons. Follow me. Stay behind me. Don't stop moving. They ran through the villa as windows exploded inward, as men shouted in Italian outside the walls, as their paradise dissolved into violence and chaos. The honeymoon was over. And Elena Vieri realized that marrying into Adriano's world meant learning to survive in it, or dying trying. Adriano shoved Elena inside, his body a windowless space reinforced with steel and concrete, designed for exactly this scenario. Adriano shoved Elena inside, his body a shield between her and the chaos erupting throughout the house. Lock it behind me, he commanded, pressing a gun into her trembling hands. Don't open it for anyone except me or Lucia, no matter what you hear. You're leaving? Elena's voice cracked. Adriano, you can't. I have to secure the perimeter before they breach the house. His eyes were hard, focused, but his hand lingered on her face for one brief moment. I will come back for you, I promise. He was gone before she could argue, the heavy door swinging shut with a hydraulic hiss. Elena's shaking hands fumbled with the lock, her breath coming in short gasps as the reality crashed over her. She was locked in a concrete box while armed men stormed the villa, and Adriano was out there, outnumbered, fighting to keep them both alive. The gun in her hands felt impossibly heavy. Elena had never held a weapon before that night in the school, had never imagined needing to, but now she gripped it like a lifeline, her finger hovering near the trigger the way Adriano had shown her during one of their security briefings she'd barely paid attention to. Gunfire erupted overhead, sharp cracks that made Elena flinch. Men shouted in Italian, their voices angry and urgent. Glass shattered. Something heavy crashed to the floor above her. Elena pressed herself against the wall, trying to make sense of the sounds. How many attackers? How many of the villa's security staff were fighting back? And where was Adriano in all that chaos? Minutes crawled past like hours. The gunfire intensified, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, thick with terrible possibility. Then footsteps on the stairs leading down to the safe room. Heavy boots. Multiple sets. Elena raised the gun with trembling hands, pointing it at the door. "Check everything," a voice commanded in accented English. "Santoro said Vieri would hide his little wife somewhere secure. Find her." Elena's heart stopped. They knew she was here. They were hunting specifically for her. The door handle rattled. Someone tried the lock, cursed when it didn't yield. "Reinforced," another voice said. "We'll need charges to breach it. Then get them." The first voice was cold, patient. "I'm not leaving without proof she's dead. The Lucianos are paying too well for half measures." Elena's hands tightened on the gun. They were going to blow the door. She was trapped with nowhere to run, no training, nothing but a weapon she barely knew how to use. She thought about her students, about the art she'd never create, about Tommy and her parents, and everyone she'd never see again. She thought about Adriano's promise to come back, wondering if he was already dead somewhere in the villa above her. And she thought about the woman she'd become over the past weeks, someone who'd survived impossible situations by making hard choices, someone who'd learned that sometimes the only option was to fight. Elena moved away from the door, positioning herself behind the safe room's heavy desk. If they breached the entrance, they'd be framed in the doorway, a clear target. If she could stay calm, stay focused, she might get one shot before they killed her. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. The footsteps retreated. Elena heard them moving equipment, preparing the charges. She had maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. Then a different sound cut through the tension, the sharp bark of gunfire from a new direction, shouting, screaming, the wet thud of bodies hitting stone floors. The men outside the safe room cursed, their attention suddenly divided. More gunfire, closer now. And through it all, a voice Elena recognized. "You're in my house." Adriano's words were cold as death. "That was your first mistake. Your last was touching what's mine." 3 gunshots in rapid succession. 2 bodies fell outside the safe room door. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats, then the lock disengaged with a mechanical click. The door swung open. Adriano stood in the doorway, covered in blood that might have been his and might not, his eyes wild and dangerous and utterly focused on Elena. He was breathing hard, a gun in each hand, and he looked more like a force of nature than a man. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. Elena lowered her weapon, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "No, I'm okay." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her against his chest with crushing intensity. "They're dead. All of them. You're safe." Elena clung to him, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms, smelling gunpowder and violence and fear, masked by control. "You're bleeding." Superficial. Adriano pulled back just enough to check her over with clinical precision, his hands running over her arms, her shoulders, making sure she was intact. "We need to move. Lucia's team is sweeping the perimeter, but there could be more coming." He was right. Elena forced herself to focus through the adrenaline. "Where do we go?" "There's a boat waiting at the private dock. We take it to Naples, then a plane back to New York." Adriano handed her a jacket, his still warm from his body. "Stay close to me. Don't look at anything you don't need to see." Elena understood what he meant when they emerged from the safe room. Bodies littered the villa, men in tactical gear, villa security staff, pools of blood spreading across marble floors. The beautiful sanctuary had become a war zone. She kept her eyes on Adriano's back and didn't look down. They moved through the carnage quickly, Adriano's gun raised and ready, Elena's hand gripped tight in his. Outside, the morning sun felt obscene, too bright, too beautiful for what had just happened. 3 of Lucia's team members appeared from different positions, weapons drawn, forming a protective perimeter. "Status," Adriano snapped. 12 hostiles down, one of them reported. 2 of ours wounded but stable. Perimeter is secure, but we need to move before Italian authorities arrive. Go. They ran down the winding path to the private dock, where a sleek speedboat waited with its engine already running. Lucia herself stood at the helm, her expression grim. "About time," she said as they boarded. "We have a 20-minute window before the Carabinieri respond to the gunfire reports." The boat shot away from the dock, cutting through blue water that looked impossibly peaceful. Elena sat beside Adriano, watching the villa recede into the distance. Smoke rose from one section of the house. Something had caught fire during the assault. 3 weeks, she said quietly. We had 3 weeks of peace. I'm sorry. Adriano's voice was rough. I thought we'd have more time before they made their move. Who did this? The Lucianos? Working with Santoro. Adriano's expression was carved from stone. He's been planning this for months, feeding them information, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Our honeymoon gave him that opening. What happens to him now? Adriano's smile was terrifying. He learns why betraying the Vieri family is worse than death. The crossing to Naples took 40 minutes. From there, Lucia had arranged a private airfield and a jet that would take them back to New York. Elena sat in the car during the drive to the airport, still wearing Adriano's blood-stained jacket, trying to process what had happened. Men had come to kill her. They'd stormed the villa specifically to eliminate Adriano's wife, and she'd been seconds away from dying when Adriano had carved through them like an avenging angel. You saved me, she said as the airfield came into view. Of course I did. Adriano looked at her like the statement was obvious. You're my wife. The marriage was supposed to be fake. Business. You said, I was wrong. He cut her off. About what this is. About what you mean to me. I realized that when I heard them coming for you and felt something I haven't felt in 13 years. What? Fear. Adriano's jaw tightened. Not strategic concern or calculated risk assessment. Real, visceral fear that I might lose you before I could tell you the truth. Elena's heart hammered. What truth? That this stopped being pretend the moment you trusted me enough to walk out of that bathroom. His hand found hers. That somewhere between the wedding and Italy, I fell in love with my own wife, and that nearly cost you your life. The admission stole Elena's breath. Adriano, I know. His smile was sad. Loving someone in my world makes them a target. I told you that, but knowing it doesn't make it less true. Elena thought about the past weeks, about the way her feelings had shifted from terror to tentative trust to something deeper she'd been afraid to name. I should be smart. I should take whatever exit you're offering and run as far as I can. Yes, you should. But I'm not going to. Elena's voice was steady despite the chaos of the day. Because somewhere between that parking lot execution and this moment, I fell in love with a man who kills people but treats me like I'm worth protecting. And I don't know if that makes me brave or insane. Probably both. Adriano pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Elena, if you stay, this is what life looks like. Attacks, betrayals, constant threat. I can't promise you safety, only that I'll die before I let anyone hurt you. That's not reassuring. It's honest. He kissed her softly. I need you to choose this with your eyes open. Choose me knowing exactly what it costs. Elena looked at this complicated, dangerous man who'd forced her into marriage and then made her fall in love with him. She thought about the teacher she'd been, grading papers in an empty classroom, invisible and safe and utterly alone. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, someone who could hold a gun steady, who could survive assassination attempts, who could love a killer without losing herself. I choose you, she said, eyes open, knowing the cost. Adriano's kiss was fierce with relief and promise, and something that felt like forever. The flight back to New York was quiet, both of them exhausted from violence and adrenaline. Elena slept against Adriano's shoulder while he made phone calls in low Italian, arranging what sounded like retribution. When they landed at a private airfield outside the city, Lucia met them with a full security detail and an armored SUV. Santoro? Adriano asked as they climbed in. Secured at the warehouse, Lucia reported, along with 3 of his conspirators. The Luciano family is claiming ignorance, but our sources confirm they bankrolled the Italy operation. Good. Adriano's voice was cold. I want messages sent to both parties. Make it clear what happens to people who target my family. Elena listened to him discuss violence like a business transaction, feeling the weight of the world she'd married into. But she didn't flinch. She'd made her choice. The penthouse felt different when they returned. No longer a gilded cage, but home. Elena showered, washing away blood and smoke and the residue of terror, while Adriano made more calls from his office. When she emerged, wrapped in a robe, she found him standing at the windows overlooking the city. He'd changed too, but he still looked exhausted, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. "When do you deal with Santoro?" she asked quietly. "Tonight." Adriano didn't turn. "It needs to be public. A message that betrayal has consequences." "Will you kill him?" "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. "He arranged to have you murdered, Elena. He knew exactly what he was doing when he gave the Lucianos our location. There's no mercy for that." Elena moved to stand beside him, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "I should be horrified. I should beg you not to." "But you're not going to." "No." Elena's voice was quiet but certain. "Because he tried to kill me. Because he would have succeeded if you hadn't been there. Because in your world, mercy is interpreted as weakness, and weakness gets more people killed." Adriano finally looked at her, something like pain crossing his expression. "You're changing, adapting to this life. I hate that I'm the reason. I'm choosing to adapt." Elena took his hand. "There's a difference. You gave me options. I chose you, chose this, chose to fight instead of hide. That's not corruption, Adriano. That's evolution." "Evolution into what?" "Into someone who can survive beside you." Elena's smile was sad. "The art teacher from Lincoln High died that night in the parking lot. I'm figuring out who Elena Vieri is supposed to be." Adriano pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the future they were building. "I don't want you to lose yourself in my darkness." "I'm not losing myself. I'm finding a different version." Elena looked up at him. "But I need you to promise me something." "Anything." "When you deal with threats, when you make hard decisions, when you do what needs to be done, let me be part of it. Don't hide it from me. I can't be your wife in public and your secret in private. I need to understand the whole truth of what we are." Adriano studied her face, searching for doubt or fear. When he found only determination, something shifted in his expression. Respect? Maybe? Or recognition? "Are you asking to come tonight, to witness Santoro's execution?" Elena's stomach turned at the thought, but she didn't waver. "Yes." "Elena, it won't be quick or clean. I need him to suffer. I need everyone who hears about it to know that touching what's mine carries a price they'll never want to pay." "I understand." "No." Adriano's hands cupped her face. "You don't. You can't, not yet. This is going to change you in ways you can't anticipate. Once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them." "I crossed those lines when I married you." Elena's voice was steady. "When I chose to stay. When I decided that loving you matters more than staying innocent. So if this is part of who you are, who we are together, then I need to see it." Adriano was silent for a long moment. "All right," he finally said. "But if at any point you need to leave, you leave. No judgment, no shame. Understand?" "I understand." The warehouse where they brought Santoro was in Red Hook, Brooklyn, an anonymous building that officially didn't exist in any Vieri business records. Lucia drove them personally, the armored SUV cutting through nighttime traffic with grim purpose. Inside, the space was cavernous and cold, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that cast everything in sharp relief. Santoro hung by his wrists from chains suspended from the ceiling, his face already swollen from preliminary interrogation. 3 other men knelt nearby, bound and gagged, forced to watch. 20 of Adriano's most loyal soldiers lined the walls, their faces impassive, their presence a statement. Elena's stomach churned, but she kept her expression neutral, her hand steady in Adriano's. "Marco Santoro." Adriano's voice echoed through the warehouse. "You've been with my family for 8 years. I promoted you, trusted you, gave you authority and respect. And you repaid that trust by selling information to the Lucianos, by arranging an attack on my wife." Santoro raised his head, blood dripping from his mouth. "You're weak, Adriano. Your father would never have let a civilian make him soft. I did what needed to be done." The gunshot cut him off. Adriano had shot him in the knee, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Santoro's scream echoed off concrete walls. "My father," Adriano said quietly. built an empire on fear. I'm building something different, something stronger. And the foundation of that empire is simple. Loyalty is rewarded, betrayal is punished, and anyone who threatens my family learns exactly what I'm capable of. He moved closer to Santoro, his movements controlled and deliberate. You arranged to have my wife murdered. You gave them our location. You facilitated an attack that could have killed the woman I love. And you think that makes you strong? Adriano's laugh was cold. That makes you short-sighted and stupid, because now everyone here will see what happens to people who make that particular mistake. What followed was methodical and brutal. Elena watched, forcing herself not to look away, as Adriano systematically destroyed Marco Santoro. Not quickly, but with calculated precision designed to maximize suffering and send an unmistakable message. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't turn away. Because this was the truth of the man she loved. And if she was going to stand beside him, she needed to understand all of what that meant. When Santoro finally died, Adriano turned to the three men kneeling nearby. You have a choice. Return to the Luciano family and tell them exactly what you witnessed. Tell them what happens to anyone who targets Elena Vieri, or stay here and join Santoro. They ran, stumbling over each other in their panic to escape. Adriano watched them go, then turned to his assembled soldiers. Let everyone know, my wife is untouchable. Anyone who threatens her answers to me personally. Anyone who helps them shares their fate. This isn't negotiable. The men nodded, their expressions a mix of respect and fear. Lucia stepped forward. I'll handle cleanup. You should take Elena home. Adriano nodded, his hand finding Elena's. They walked out of the warehouse together, leaving death and retribution behind them. In the car, Elena was silent, processing what she'd witnessed. Adriano gave her space, not pressing, just present. Finally, she spoke. I should be sick, traumatized, something. Give it time. Adriano's voice was gentle. Delayed reactions are normal. No. Elena looked at him. I'm not having a delayed reaction. I'm having a realization. What realization? That I understand now, why you do what you do, the language you speak in your world. Elena's voice was quiet but certain. Santoro tried to kill me. The Lucianos funded it. They needed to learn that action has consequences, or they'd just try again. What I witnessed tonight wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was communication. Adriano studied her face. You're justifying what you saw. No, I'm understanding it. Elena squeezed his hand. There's a difference. I don't have to like it to recognize its necessity in your world. Our world now, Adriano corrected softly. If you're staying, I'm staying. Elena's smile was sad but genuine. Though I reserve the right to paint angry abstract art about the things that keep me up at night. Fair. Adriano pulled her close. I love you, Elena Vieri, even though loving you terrifies me. I love you too. Elena kissed him softly. Even though you're the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me. They returned to the penthouse as dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Elena stood at the windows, watching the city wake up, feeling fundamentally changed from the woman who'd graded papers in an empty classroom just weeks ago. Adriano came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild. Adriano's voice was quiet. We shore up security, identify other potential traitors, strengthen our position. And we figure out what our life looks like going forward. Together. Together. He turned her to face him. I meant what I said, Elena. 6 months, a year, that timeline is gone. If you'll have me, this marriage is permanent, real, everything. Elena looked at this man who'd forced her into marriage and then made her choose to stay. This killer who'd protected her, this crime boss who loved her. Then I guess I'm really Elena Vieri now, she said. For better or worse. Probably worse, Adriano admitted. My world is complicated and dangerous and full of people who'll want to hurt you to hurt me. Then we'll just have to make sure they learn the same lesson Santoro did. Elena's smile was sharp. That I'm not the weakness in your empire, Adriano. I'm the strength you didn't know you needed. Adriano's kiss was fierce with promise and possession and something that felt like forever. Outside, New York continued its relentless rhythm. Inside the penthouse, two people who shouldn't have worked learned to build something stronger than strategy. The art teacher and the crime boss, the witness and the killer, the forced marriage that became real love. Their story was just beginning. The weeks following Santoro's execution were marked by a tense quiet that felt more dangerous than open conflict. Elena learned to read the subtle shifts in Adriano's world, the way his lieutenants watched her with new respect tinged with wariness, how rival families tested boundaries with small provocations, the constant undercurrent of violence held in check by reputation and fear. She also learned that being Elena Vieri meant more than survival. It meant becoming part of an empire she was only beginning to understand. "I want to do something," she told Adriano one morning over coffee, 6 weeks after their return from Italy. "Something real. I can't just exist in this penthouse, shopping and pretending to be a society wife." Adriano looked up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to teach again." Elena's voice was firm. "Not at Lincoln High. I understand that's impossible now, but maybe private lessons or a community program. Something that lets me be more than just your wife." "That makes you a target." Adriano's response was immediate. Public appearances, predictable schedule, contact with civilians who could be compromised. "Everything makes me a target," Elena cut him off. "That's the reality of this life. But I refuse to let fear turn me into a prisoner. You said I was strength, not weakness. Let me prove it." Adriano studied her for a long moment, that intense focus she'd come to know well. "What kind of program?" "Art therapy for at-risk youth. Kids from difficult backgrounds who need someone to see them." Elena leaned forward. "The Vieri family has resources. Use some of them for something good, something that helps instead of hurts." "You want me to fund a community center?" Adriano's smile was slight but genuine. "Using crime money to create legitimate social programs." "It's called reinvestment," Elena smiled back. "Besides, every empire needs a philanthropic face. Why not make mine actually mean something?" 3 days later, Adriano presented her with paperwork for the Vieri Foundation, a non-profit organization with Elena as its director, backed by enough money to make a real difference. The first initiative would be an art program in Brooklyn, serving the same neighborhoods where Adriano's less legitimate businesses operated. "You're laundering your reputation through my good intentions," Elena said, reading through the documents. "I'm giving my wife the tools to build something beautiful in a world that usually only sees ugliness." Adriano's hand covered hers. "And yes, it serves strategic purposes, but that doesn't make it less real." Elena threw herself into the work with intensity that surprised even her. She found a space in Red Hook, hired staff, developed curriculum, and personally interviewed every student who applied. The program launched in October, 2 months after the Italy attack, with 15 teenagers whose eyes held the same invisibility she'd once known. Adriano attended the opening, bringing half his security team and drawing stares from parents who recognized power when they saw it. But he stayed for the entire first session, watching Elena work with the students, his expression unreadable. "You're good at this," he said later that evening. "You light up when you teach. It's like watching someone come alive." "Because this is who I am." Elena curled against him on the penthouse couch. "Everything else, the marriage, the violence, the empire, that's who I had to become. But this is who I choose to be." "Then keep choosing it." Adriano kissed her forehead. "I'll make sure you're protected while you do." But protection couldn't prevent every threat. In November, 3 months after Santoro's death, the Luciano family made their move. It started with small provocations. Shipments delayed, bribes to city officials intercepted, 2 of Adriano's legitimate businesses hit with surprise health inspections that found violations where none existed. Adriano met each challenge with measured responses, unwilling to escalate into full war but making it clear he wouldn't tolerate sustained aggression. Then they targeted the art program. Elena arrived at the Red Hook space on a Wednesday afternoon to find it vandalized, paint splattered across walls, canvases destroyed, equipment smashed. Spray painted across the main studio in crude letters, "Vieri Blood Money." She stood in the wreckage, fury burning through shock. Lucia appeared at her side, weapon drawn. Scanning for threats. "We need to leave. Now." This could be a setup. No. Elena's voice was cold. Call Adriano. Tell him I need him here. And get me the security footage. Within 20 minutes, Adriano arrived with a full tactical team. He took in the destruction, his expression turning to stone. The Lucianos, Elena said before he could speak. This is their work. Yes. Adriano's voice was deadly quiet. They're testing boundaries, seeing if attacking something you care about will make me back down from our territorial dispute. What are you going to do? I'm going to remind them why that was a mistake. Adriano pulled out his phone, already dialing. Lucia, I want locations on every Luciano lieutenant by nightfall. I want their distribution networks mapped. And I want a meeting with Don Luciano within 48 hours. Adriano. Elena caught his arm. This isn't worth starting a war over. They attacked what's yours. That makes it worth everything. His eyes met hers. You wanted to build something good in this world. I'm not letting anyone destroy that. The meeting with Don Luciano took place 2 days later in neutral territory, a private room at a high-end restaurant in Midtown, with both sides bringing minimal security to maintain the pretense of civility. Elena insisted on attending. This isn't necessary, Adriano argued as they dressed for the meeting. You don't need to expose yourself to. They vandalized my program. They destroyed work my students created. Elena's tone left no room for argument. I'm not hiding while you handle this. We do it together or not at all. Don Luciano was older than Elena expected, probably 80. With the kind of ancient cruelty that came from surviving decades in a world that consumed weaker men. He sat across from them with 2 of his sons flanking him, his rheumy eyes missing nothing. Adriano, the Don's voice was surprisingly strong. And the famous Elena Vieri, the woman who started all this trouble. The woman your family has repeatedly tried to kill, Elena said before Adriano could respond. Let's be accurate about who started what. Don Luciano's laugh was dry as dust. She has fire, this one. I see why you keep her around. I keep her around because she's my wife. Adriano's tone was ice. And because anyone who threatens her learns painful lessons, as Santoro discovered, as your men in Italy discovered, as whoever vandalized her art program is about to discover. About that, Don Luciano leaned back. Unfortunate misunderstanding. Overzealous soldiers acting without authorization. I've already disciplined the responsible parties. That's not good enough. Elena leaned forward, ignoring Adriano's warning hand on her arm. Those kids did nothing to you. They're not part of your war with Adriano. They're just teenagers trying to survive circumstances they didn't choose. And you used them to send a message. Welcome to our world, Mrs. Vieri. The Don's smile was patronizing. Where everything is a message and innocent casualties are simply the cost of business. Then change the business. Elena's voice was hard. You're sitting across from Adriano instead of fighting a war that would cost both families millions and dozens of lives. That's already a message. That negotiation is possible. So negotiate. What do you actually want? The Don studied her with new interest. You ask what I want? I want the territories your husband's family has controlled for 3 generations. I want the shipping contracts, the union influence, the political connections. I want what the Vieri name represents. And you can't have it. Adriano's voice was flat. So let's discuss what you can have. What followed was an hour of careful negotiation, territory exchanges, profit-sharing arrangements, agreements on spheres of influence that would prevent further conflict. Elena listened, learning the language of power that ruled Adriano's world. One condition, she said when they'd reached the framework of an agreement. The art program is off limits. So is any other community initiative the Vieri Foundation undertakes. You want to fight Adriano's business interests? Fine, but you leave the kids out of it. Don Luciano looked at Adriano. Your wife negotiates your treaties now. My wife negotiates what matters to her. Adriano's hand found Elena's. And what matters to her matters to me. So yes, the foundation is off limits. That's non-negotiable. The Don considered this, then nodded slowly. Agreed, though I suspect you'll regret letting her speak for you. I suspect you'll regret underestimating her. Adriano stood, pulling Elena with him. We have a deal, Don Luciano. Honor it, and we avoid a war neither of us can afford. Break it, and I'll respond with everything I have. They left the restaurant with an uneasy peace in place. Not friendship, not even real trust, but a structured framework that made open conflict more costly than cooperation. In the car afterward, Adriano turned to Elena. That was either brilliant or insane. I haven't decided which. Both, probably. Elena was still shaking with adrenaline. Did I overstep? No. Adriano pulled her close. You showed him that attacking you means dealing with you directly, that you're not just my wife, you're a force in your own right. That's exactly the message that needed sending. I just wanted to protect the kids. I know. Adriano kissed her softly. And you did, by proving that Elena Vieri isn't someone to dismiss or underestimate. The art program reopened a week later, fully repaired and with enhanced security that would make future attacks prohibitively difficult. Elena's students returned with new determination, creating murals about resilience and transformation that covered the walls where vandalism had been. And Elena discovered something unexpected. That power, wielded carefully, could protect the vulnerable as much as it could harm them. Winter settled over New York, and Elena's life found new rhythms. She taught 3 days a week at the Red Hook program, attended society functions with Adriano, where she smiled and made strategic small talk with the wives of men who feared her husband, and slowly built a network of influence that existed parallel to, but separate from, Adriano's criminal empire. You're becoming formidable, Lucia observed one afternoon while driving Elena to a foundation meeting. The families talk about you differently now, not as Adriano's weakness, but as an asset they can't quite figure out how to neutralize. Good. Elena reviewed notes for her presentation. Fear I can work with. Pity would be useless. But the real test came in February, 6 months after the wedding, when Elena discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the positive test for a full 5 minutes before the reality sank in. A baby. She was going to have Adriano's child, a child who would be born into this impossible world of violence and power and constant threat. She told him that night, watching his face carefully for any reaction that would tell her what he really thought. Adriano went completely still, his dark eyes searching hers. You're sure? 3 tests, all positive. Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. I know this complicates everything. I know a child makes us more vulnerable, gives our enemies another target. I'm going to be a father. Adriano's voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard before. He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with desperate gentleness. Elena, we're going to have a child. Are you happy about this? She whispered against his chest. Terrified, he admitted. But yes, so happy I can barely breathe. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, feeling the weight of this new reality settling over them. Everything changes now, Adriano said finally. Security protocols, living arrangements, succession planning. I need to make sure our child is protected in ways I never was. We need to make sure our child knows love, Elena corrected. Not just protection. Love. The kind that doesn't come with conditions or strategic calculations. I don't know how to do that. Adriano's honesty was stark. My father raised me to be his successor. Love wasn't part of the equation. I don't know how to be the kind of father a child deserves. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena pulled back to look at him. The same way we figured out everything else, by choosing something better than what came before. Word of Elena's pregnancy spread through the families within days. Information traveled fast in Adriano's world, and this particular information carried weight. A Vieri heir changed political calculations, shifted alliance structures, created new opportunities and threats. Don Calabrese sent an elaborate gift basket with a note of congratulations that felt more like a reminder of his continued scrutiny. Don Luciano sent nothing, but Elena's security detail doubled overnight, a sign that Adriano was taking no chances. Tommy flew in from Berkeley when Elena called with the news, immediately demanding to know if Adriano was ready for fatherhood. I'm not sure anyone's ready for fatherhood, Adriano said over dinner at the penthouse. But I'm going to do everything in my power to give this child a better world than I inherited. Better how? Tommy's protective instincts were showing. You can't exactly leave the family business. No, but I can transform it. Adriano leaned forward. I've been moving assets into legitimate enterprises for years. Construction, shipping, real estate development. By the time our child is old enough to understand what the Vieri name means, I want it to mean more than organized crime. That's a nice dream, Tommy said. But the families won't just let you walk away from the power structure. I'm not walking away. I'm evolving it. Adriano's expression was determined. It'll take years, maybe decades. But I'm building something that can eventually become legitimate. For my child. For Elena. For the future we're creating. Elena listened to her husband and her brother talk, feeling the strange convergence of her old life and new reality. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was building a future that mattered. But the past wasn't finished with them yet. In March, when Elena was 3 months pregnant and just beginning to show, an attempt was made on her life. It happened at the Red Hook art program during what should have been a routine afternoon session. Elena was helping a student with perspective techniques when Lucia's voice cut through her earpiece. An emergency alert. Threat detected. 2 vehicles approaching fast. Elena, shelter in place now. Elena's training kicked in immediately. She calmly dismissed the students, sending them to the secure room in the back, while she moved to the reinforced office where weapons and communication equipment were hidden behind false walls. Status, she said into her comm unit, her hand moving to the gun Adriano had insisted she carry everywhere. Unknown hostiles, 3 men in each vehicle. Lucia's voice was calm but urgent. Adriano's en route with tactical team. ETA 6 minutes. Hold position. 6 minutes felt like forever. Elena crouched behind the desk, listening to her students' frightened whispers from the secure room, feeling her heart race with fear for the life growing inside her. Then gunfire erupted outside. But it wasn't directed at the building. It was coming from 2 different directions, converging on the approaching vehicles. Adriano's team had intercepted the threat before it reached her. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes. When silence fell, Lucia's voice came through the comm. Threat neutralized. All hostiles down. You're clear. Elena sagged against the desk, her hand pressed to her stomach, feeling adrenaline crash into relief. The baby, their baby, was safe. Adriano arrived minutes later, his face carved from fury and fear. He swept Elena into his arms, checking her over with clinical precision despite the gentleness of his touch. I'm okay, she assured him. We're both okay. This can't keep happening. Adriano's voice was rough. I can't keep putting you in positions where someone might... He couldn't finish the sentence. Then we end it. Elena's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. Permanently. Whatever family sent these men, we make sure they never try again. Elena, no. She cut him off. I'm done being reactive. Done waiting for the next attack. We have a child coming, Adriano. I need to know they'll grow up safe, not constantly looking over their shoulder. So we finish this. Whatever it takes. Adriano studied her face, seeing the transformation from frightened victim to something harder, more dangerous. You're asking me to start a war. I'm asking you to end one. Elena's eyes were fierce. Decisively, permanently, show every family in this city what happens when they threaten your wife and child. What Adriano unleashed over the next 3 weeks was calculated and devastating. Using information gathered from the captured assassins, there had been 1 survivor. He traced the attack back to a smaller family trying to make a name for themselves by eliminating the Vieri heir before it could be born. The response was surgical and absolute. Adriano didn't just destroy the family responsible. He dismantled their entire organization, seized their territories, and absorbed their assets into Vieri operations. He made examples of their leadership that echoed Santoro's fate, and he made sure every family in New York understood the message. Elena Vieri and her unborn child were untouchable. Any threat against them would be met with total annihilation. Don Calabrese himself came to the penthouse to acknowledge the new reality. You've made your point, Adriano, the old Don said, his weathered face showing grudging respect. The Vieri family is stronger than it's been in decades. Your wife has made you dangerous in new ways. My wife has made me better in every way. Adriano's hand rested protectively on Elena's growing belly. And anyone who forgets that will learn exactly how dangerous better can be. After the Don left, Elena stood at the windows overlooking Manhattan, feeling the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings against her palm. "Do you ever regret it?" Adriano asked, coming up behind her. "Staying, choosing this life, becoming who you've become." Elena thought about the art teacher who'd graded papers in an empty classroom, invisible and safe and utterly alone. She thought about the woman she was now, protected, powerful, loved and dangerous, and building something that mattered. "No," she said honestly. "I regret the violence. I regret the fear. I regret that our child will grow up in a world where these threats exist. But I don't regret you. I don't regret us. I don't regret choosing to fight instead of hide. Even knowing what it's cost you, especially knowing that," Elena turned to face him, "because what I've gained is worth more than what I lost. I was invisible before you, Adriano. Now I'm seen. I matter. I make a difference. And I'm building a future where our child won't have to choose between safety and significance." Adriano kissed her softly, his hand joining hers on her stomach. "I love you, Elena Vieri, more than I thought I was capable of loving anything." "I love you too," Elena smiled, "even though you're the most dangerous thing that ever happened to me." "Second most dangerous," Adriano corrected, his smile matching hers. "You're more dangerous than I ever was. You just hide it better." Their daughter was born in September, exactly 1 year after the night Elena had witnessed a murder in a rain-soaked parking lot. They named her Sofia, after Adriano's mother, and she had Elena's dark eyes and Adriano's determined expression from the moment she entered the world. Elena held her daughter in the private hospital room, secured by enough guards to protect a head of state, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. This small, perfect life was worth every terrible choice she'd made to get here. "She's beautiful," Tommy whispered, meeting his niece for the first time. "She looks like you, Ellie." "She looks like hope," Elena corrected. "Like the future we're building." Adriano sat beside them, his finger caught in Sofia's tiny grip, his face transformed by wonder and fierce protectiveness. "I swear to you," he murmured to his daughter, "you'll grow up in a world better than the one I inherited. I'll make sure of it." And over the next year, he did. Adriano accelerated his transition of family assets into legitimate businesses, using his influence and resources to build an empire that could eventually exist without the criminal foundation it was built on. The Vieri Foundation expanded under Elena's direction, creating programs throughout New York that helped at-risk youth, supported struggling families, and transformed neighborhoods that had been written off as hopeless. Elena returned to teaching when Sofia was 6 months old, bringing her daughter to the Red Hook program and letting her students see that transformation was possible, that the invisible could become visible, that survival could become strength, that forced circumstances could evolve into chosen futures. "You know what the families call you now?" Lucia told Elena one afternoon while they reviewed security protocols for an upcoming foundation gala. "What?" "La Regina Nascosta, the hidden queen." Lucia smiled slightly. "Because you wield as much power as Adriano in your own way, but you do it so subtly that by the time people realize what you've built, it's already unshakable." Elena looked at the program she'd created, at the students whose lives were changing, at the empire of good she was constructing parallel to Adriano's more complicated legacy. "I'm not trying to be a queen. I'm trying to be what I needed when I was invisible, someone who sees, someone who helps." "That's what makes you dangerous," Lucia said, "because you actually believe in what you're doing. That's more powerful than fear or money or violence. That's permanent." The gala took place in November, 2 years after the wedding that had started everything. It celebrated the Vieri Foundation's expansion into educational programming across 3 boroughs, with Elena as the keynote speaker and Adriano as the proud husband standing slightly in her shadow. Don Calabrese attended, as did representatives from every major family in New York. They came because refusing would be an insult, but also because Elena had built something they couldn't ignore, a legitimate empire that somehow enhanced the Vieri reputation rather than contradicting it. 2 years ago, Elena said during her speech, standing at the podium with confidence she'd learned through necessity, "I was invisible, just another person going through the motions, convinced that I didn't matter. Then circumstances I couldn't control changed everything about my life. And I had to choose. Let those circumstances destroy me or use them to build something better. She looked out at the assembled crowd, criminals and philanthropists, killers and community leaders, people who operated in shadows, and people who created light. The Vieri Foundation represents that choice. We take difficult circumstances and transform them into opportunities. We see people who've been invisible and help them become visible. We prove that no matter where you start, you can build a future worth fighting for. The applause was genuine, and Elena saw respect in faces that had once dismissed her as Adriano's weakness. She'd proven them wrong. She'd become something they hadn't anticipated, a force that didn't rely on violence or fear, but wielded power nonetheless. After the gala, back at the penthouse with Sofia asleep in her nursery and the city glowing beyond the windows, Elena stood beside Adriano in comfortable silence. "Do you think she'll understand someday?" Elena asked, meaning their daughter. "What we are, what we've built, the complicated truth of how this family works." "I think we'll raise her to understand that people are complicated," Adriano said, "that good and bad aren't always clearly defined, that sometimes you do questionable things for the right reasons, and sometimes the right thing requires getting your hands dirty. That's a heavy burden for a child. It's the truth." Adriano pulled Elena close. "But we'll also raise her to know she's loved, protected, seen, that she matters more than any empire or organization or power structure. Those things are tools. She's the purpose." Elena leaned into her husband's embrace, feeling the life they'd built settling around them like armor that was finally familiar. "2 years ago, you told me this marriage would last 6 months, that it was just business. I was spectacularly wrong." Adriano's smile was genuine. "About the timeline, about the business, about thinking I could keep you at arm's length." "When did you know?" Elena asked. "When did it stop being strategy and become real?" Adriano was quiet for a moment, considering. "When you asked to witness Santoro's execution, when you looked at the worst part of who I am and didn't flinch, when you chose to understand instead of judge." His hand cupped her face. "That's when I knew you weren't just surviving in my world. You were transforming it, and I'd never let you go." "Good," Elena kissed him softly, "because I'm not going anywhere. This life we've built, complicated and dangerous and imperfect as it is, it's ours. And I choose it. I choose you. Every day." "Every day," Adriano echoed, and it sounded like a promise. 3 years after that rainy night in a high school parking lot, Elena Vieri stood in her Red Hook art program, surrounded by students creating beauty from pain. Her daughter played in the corner under Lucia's watchful eye. Her husband was downtown, attending to empire business that was slowly, incrementally, becoming more legitimate than criminal. One of her students, a 15-year-old girl named Maya, who reminded Elena of her younger self, approached with a canvas. "I finished it," Maya said shyly, "the self-portrait you assigned." Elena studied the painting. It showed Maya in shadow on one side, invisible and small. On the other side, the same girl stood in brilliant color, confident and seen. "It's about transformation," Maya explained, "about how you can be 2 different people, who you were and who you're becoming, and both versions are real." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "This is exactly what art should do. Show us the truth of who we are and who we can be." After class, Elena sat in her office, looking at the program she'd built from nothing, at the lives she was changing, at the empire of good she was constructing one student at a time. "More," came the reply. "Though I reserve the right to change my mind, I'm not going to. I'm not going to change my mind. But I'm not going to change my mind. 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 I'm not going to change my more, came the reply, though I reserve the right to argue that point for the next 50 years. Elena laughed, pocketing her phone. 50 years. A lifetime. A future she'd never imagined when she'd stayed late to grade papers on a rain-soaked Friday night. She'd been invisible then, alone. Safe, but unutterably lonely. Now she was seen, loved, dangerous in ways that mattered, and building something that would outlast the violence that had brought them together. The art teacher and the crime boss, the forced marriage that became real love, the woman who'd witnessed a murder and ended up transforming an empire. Their story had started with fear and survival, but it had become something far more powerful, a partnership built on choice, strengthened by adversity and sustained by the kind of love that refused to be anything less than extraordinary. Elena Vieri gathered her things, said goodnight to her students, and headed home to the family she'd built from impossible circumstances. She'd never be invisible again, and that she realized as she stepped into the Manhattan twilight with her daughter's hand in hers and her husband waiting at home was the greatest transformation of all. The woman who had once hidden in a bathroom stall now stood at the center of an empire, not because she'd been forced to, but because she'd chosen to fight for something better. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference.